On April 28, 2026, two Russian satellites moved through low Earth orbit with the kind of precision that makes orbital analysts stop scrolling. Cosmos 2581 and Cosmos 2583 reportedly came within roughly 10 feet of one another, or about 3 meters, while moving around Earth at orbital velocity. The broader cluster included Cosmos 2582 and a released object known as Object F. ComSpock assessed the event using Leo Labs radar tracking data, and the maneuver was described as highly sophisticated. That word matters. Sophisticated means controlled. It means deliberate. It means somebody has rehearsed the dance and understands the floor. Nothing exploded. There was no flaming debris trail across the sky. No civilian saw a streak overhead and reached for a phone. No president appeared behind a podium flanked by flags and grim officials. In a strange way, that quietness is the point. The most important events in space security often arrive without spectacle. They happen above the weather, above the press conference, above the ordinary imagination. A satellite that fires a weapon announces itself. A satellite that creeps close, holds position, releases a smaller object, or shadows another spacecraft does something subtler. It creates uncertainty. It makes operators ask whether they are watching a test, a rehearsal, a signal, or the early movement of an attack. That uncertainty is not a side effect. It is the strategic value. The official name for this kind of activity is Rendezvous and Proximity Operations, or RPO. The phrase sounds almost harmless, as if it belongs in a maintenance manual with clean diagrams and very confident arrows. RPO means that one spacecraft deliberately approaches, matches motion with, inspects, docks with, or operates near another object in orbit. In peaceful hands, it is essential. In hostile hands, it becomes a threat with a polite name. RPO is how future spacecraft will repair damaged satellites, refuel aging systems, remove debris, inspect expensive assets, and assemble larger structures in orbit. A mature space economy will need these capabilities. Disposable satellites are useful, but they are crude. Repair, reuse, servicing, and orbital logistics are the signs of a grown-up civilization in space. The toolbox is impressive. The problem, as usual, is the hand holding it. The same capability that lets a spacecraft inspect a solar array can let it study the vulnerable features of a military satellite. The same precision that enables docking can support sabotage. The same approach maneuver that makes debris removal possible can place a spacecraft inside another nation's threat envelope. In space, the line between helpful and hostile is often behavioral rather than physical. The hardware may look similar. The pattern tells the story. Russia's recent maneuver matters because it fits a longer pattern. Secure World Foundation has documented Russian military and intelligence RPO activity in low Earth orbit and geostationary orbit since 2014, with many operations tied to space security and situational awareness missions. Russia has also developed and tested capabilities that can support co-orbital anti-satellite behavior, where a spacecraft in orbit maneuvers near a target rather than attacking from Earth. That distinction is important. A direct descent anti-satellite weapon rises from Earth and strikes a target in orbit. It is dramatic, visible, and politically expensive. A co-orbital system works differently. It may launch as an ordinary satellite. It may maneuver later. It may approach slowly, release a smaller object, inspect a target, interfere with operations, or threaten action without crossing the line into open attack. It is the difference between kicking down a door and standing close enough to the door that the owner starts sleeping badly. The next phase of space conflict may center less on spectacular destruction and more on ambiguous orbital coercion. A satellite does not need to fire a weapon to become strategically useful. It can stalk. It can loiter. It can force a defensive maneuver. It can make a target operator spend fuel, attention, time, and political capital. It can create a crisis without creating debris. That is why the phrase, "the killer satellite that never fires," matters. The point is not that every Russian RPO event is an attack. The point is that close proximity capability gives a state options short of attack. It lets a state signal danger while denying hostility. It lets a state test thresholds without forcing an immediate military response. It gives diplomats room to perform innocence with a straight face, which is one of the older arts of statecraft. Modern military power depends on space. Missile warning, secure communications, intelligence collection, targeting, navigation, timing, weather data, and nuclear command and control all rely on orbital systems. The modern battlefield has an orbital nervous system. Damage that nervous system, and the body may remain intact, but it starts moving with confusion. A close proximity satellite threatens that nervous system in a way that is difficult to classify. It may be collecting intelligence. It may be testing guidance. It may be rehearsing a future attack. It may be sending a signal. It may be doing all of those things at once. Spacecraft do not carry intent labels. There is no face to read, no posture to judge, no captain visible on a bridge. There is orbit, maneuver history, sensor data, and interpretation. That makes the problem both technical and political. Operators can calculate trajectories, relative velocities, conjunction risks, and approach geometry. Policymakers must decide what the maneuver means. Military commanders must decide whether to respond. Commercial operators may need to protect customers, service continuity, and insurance claims. Lawyers open treaties. Analysts compare orbital data. Everyone hopes the next movement clarifies the last one, which is rarely how adversaries prefer to behave. Russia has used ambiguity this way before. In 2020, US officials warned that Russian satellites were shadowing a US spy satellite, and General John Raymond described the behavior as unusual and potentially dangerous. In 2024, US officials assessed that Cosmos 2576 was a counter-space weapon placed into an orbital region associated with a US government satellite, while Russia rejected the accusation and called the charge false. That is the rhythm of gray zone space competition. A satellite moves. One government accuses. Another government denies. Commercial trackers publish data. Allies ask for briefings. The accused party invokes peaceful use in international law. The accuser invokes responsible behavior and threat patterns. The satellite keeps moving. The old public picture of space warfare was cinematic. Missiles, explosions, fire, debris, and dramatic music. The emerging reality may be quieter. It may look like a spacecraft moving 3 meters too close. Rendezvous and proximity operations sit at the center of advanced space activity. A spacecraft that can approach another object, match its motion, maintain a safe relative position, inspect it, dock with it, or depart from it has crossed an important technical threshold. It is no longer merely occupying orbit. It is operating within another object's local neighborhood. This is harder than the phrase suggests. On Earth, people think of movement in simple terms. A car changes lanes. A ship crosses a harbor. An aircraft intercepts another aircraft. Orbital mechanics refuses that simplicity. A satellite does not steer through space like a pickup truck on a county road. It changes velocity, which changes altitude, which changes orbital period, which changes where it will be later. In orbit, chasing something often requires moving in a way that looks backward to ordinary intuition. Space has a taste for making clever people feel underdressed. At large distances, the challenge is prediction. Operators must know where both objects are, where they will be, and how maneuver uncertainty changes over time. At closer distances, the challenge becomes relative motion. A small difference in velocity can matter. A slight navigation error can become a collision risk. A weak sensor solution can lead to a bad command. A communication delay can leave operators reacting to a situation that has already changed. RPO requires accurate tracking, orbit determination, propulsion control, guidance software, navigation sensors, fault management, command and control discipline, and mission planning. It also requires restraint. The operator must know when to stop approaching, when to hold, when to back away, and when the safest maneuver is the one left undone. This is a ballet for machines, except the stage is moving, the dancers are expensive, and the orchestra is made of math. Peaceful RPO has obvious value. A servicing spacecraft could extend the life of a valuable communications satellite in geostationary orbit. An inspection spacecraft could diagnose damage after a suspected collision or micrometeoroid strike. A debris removal mission could approach and capture a dead rocket body. A future orbital construction system could assemble large structures that are too large to launch in one piece. Refueling, repair, life extension, assembly, and debris removal all depend on the ability to work near other objects. That is why responsible space operators defend RPO. They should. Without close operations, the space economy remains more wasteful than it needs to be. Satellites become throwaway machines. Broken systems stay broken. Derelict objects keep drifting. Repair crews never arrive because the garage never left Earth. The security problem comes from the same qualities that make RPO useful. A spacecraft that can repair can also tamper. A spacecraft that can inspect can also collect intelligence. A spacecraft that can dock can also interfere. A spacecraft that can move debris can also move something its owner would rather keep in place. The capability itself does not announce its moral condition. Its use does. Dual use is one of those neat policy phrases that hides a great deal of disorder. It means the same technology can serve useful and dangerous missions without changing its outward form. A camera can inspect damage or map a target. A thruster can support docking or threatening. A manipulator arm can repair a spacecraft or seize one. A release mechanism can deploy a sensor package or a weapon. The orbit alone may not resolve the purpose. In terrestrial military affairs, at least the visual cues are often clearer. A tank does not look like a school bus. A missile battery does not look like a fruit stand, unless the deception unit has become unusually ambitious. In space, appearance tells less. Many satellites are boxes with solar arrays, antennas, sensors, and propulsion. The object's behavior carries more evidence than its silhouette. That means analysts read spacecraft the way detectives read habits. Where did it launch? What orbit did it enter? What objects does it approach? How often does it maneuver? Does it release anything? Does it maintain safe separation? Does it communicate intent? Does its behavior resemble previous systems? Has its owner used similar spacecraft in suspicious ways before? This turns orbital behavior into strategic biography. Every maneuver becomes part of the record. Over time, the pattern matters more than the press release. RPO also changes the meaning of distance. In ordinary language, 3 meters is trivial. In orbit, 3 meters can be astonishingly close. Even 100 kilometers can be operationally meaningful if one spacecraft is shadowing another along a similar orbital path. Close is not a fixed number. It depends on relative velocity, maneuver capability, sensor quality, mission context, object size, and whether the operator has communicated its intentions. The naval analogy helps, but only up to a point. A warship can shadow another ship at sea. It can sail close enough to intimidate, collect signals, or test response. The other ship can hail it, photograph it, turn away, or maneuver. There is a captain on a bridge, a crew on deck, and radio traffic to interpret. At sea, the drama has weather, flags, and men with binoculars. In space, the bridge is on Earth. Operators rely on tracking data, telemetry, space domain awareness networks, and models. They may not know what the other spacecraft is sensing, whether its payload is active, whether its maneuvers are automated, or what its next command will be. The confrontation is real, but it arrives through screens and equations. It is a knife fight conducted by accountants of velocity. That is why RPO can be so useful to a state that wants pressure without open conflict. The activity can be visible enough to alarm the target, but ambiguous enough to deny hostile intent. It can force an operator to maneuver, spend fuel, alter mission operations, or seek political guidance. It can test thresholds and response times. It can reveal how a target behaves under pressure. Fuel deserves special attention. Satellite propellant is not a minor concern. It is mission life, flexibility, and future maneuver authority. Every avoidable burn reduces options. A hostile actor that repeatedly forces another spacecraft to maneuver may impose a form of attrition without touching it. No debris cloud forms, no attack is declared, yet the target loses something valuable. This kind of pressure has strategic value. A threatening satellite may never collide with its target. It may never jam a signal. It may never fire anything. The cost lies in uncertainty, planning disruption, fuel expenditure and crisis, attention. A spacecraft can become coercive by making another spacecraft's operator live under the possibility of harm. RPO is not inherently sinister, and it is not inherently innocent. It is a tool of proximity. Proximity creates possibility. Possibility creates pressure. Advanced RPO also shows maturity. A state that can conduct precise close approaches has proven command discipline, tracking quality, propulsion control, and mission planning. Even when a test occurs between two satellites owned by the same state, the demonstration matters. A state that can close safely with its own object may later approach someone else's. This is why the April 2026 Russian maneuver deserves attention. The close approach between Cosmos 2581 and Cosmos 2583 does not by itself prove an attack plan. It does show that Russia can conduct controlled, sophisticated proximity activity involving multiple objects. In a security environment already shaped by previous Russian shadowing and counterspace allegations, that capability becomes strategically meaningful. The United States, China, and other space powers also possess RPO capabilities. The issue is not whether such capabilities should exist. They already do, and future space logistics will need them. The issue is whether states use proximity responsibly, transparently, and safely, or whether they use it as a way to coerce competitors while staying beneath the line of open war. The space community sometimes treats norms as if they float above power. They do not. Norms are useful when they are tied to behavior, evidence, and consequence. A norm against dangerous close approaches must be connected to tracking data, notification practices, safe separation expectations, and public attribution. Otherwise, it becomes another lovely document that everyone praises while ignoring with professional grace. RPO is where the future space economy and the future space battlefield meet. It may give us satellite repair, debris removal, orbital construction, and life extension. It may also give us stalking, sabotage, shadowing, and co-orbital coercion. The same capability opens both doors. Russia's space tradition contains genuine majesty. Sputnik changed the world. Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. Soviet engineering built stations, probes, launch vehicles, and spacecraft that shaped the modern space age. The Russian space inheritance is real, formidable, and historically deep. Modern Russia, though, is not the Soviet Union. Its economy is smaller. Its industrial base faces strain. Its military has absorbed the pressure of war, sanctions, and long-term procurement problems. Its space sector still has skill, but it operates under limits. Those limits matter because states under constraint often seek asymmetric tools. If you cannot match the United States satellite for satellite, you look for ways to threaten the satellites that matter most. This is where co-orbital capabilities become attractive. A few maneuverable spacecraft can impose headaches on a much larger architecture. They can threaten high-value targets, collect intelligence, and create decision pressure. They can do so without the political shock of a direct ascent anti-satellite test that creates a debris cloud and invites global condemnation. Russia's RPO activity since 2014 should be understood in this setting. Secure World Foundation has tracked several Russian military and intelligence-related RPO operations in both low Earth orbit and geostationary orbit. That does not mean every maneuver is hostile, but it does mean the behavior belongs inside a military space pattern rather than a collection of isolated curiosities. The 2020 incident involving Russian satellites shadowing a U.S. spy satellite brought that pattern into public view. U.S. officials described Russian behavior as unusual and concerning, and the fact that the concern was voiced publicly mattered. Governments often keep sensitive space incidents quiet. Public warning is itself a signal. It says the behavior has crossed from private worry into strategic messaging. That episode also showed how RPO creates diplomatic friction. Russia could describe its satellites as operating within legal bounds. The United States could describe their proximity as threatening. Outside observers could study catalog data and tracking reports. Each side could maintain its public line. The satellites, meanwhile, continued their orbital work. This is the gray zone in its cleanest form, visible enough to matter, ambiguous enough to argue about. The pattern did not end there. In 2024, the United States assessed that Russia launched Cosmos 2576, a satellite U.S. officials characterized as a counterspace weapon capable of threatening other spacecraft. Reuters reported that Cosmos 2576 was observed in the same orbital ring as USA 314, a U.S. government satellite, though it had not approached the U.S. satellite at the time of reporting. Russia denied the accusation, called it false, and argued that its activities complied with international law. That dispute had all the features of modern space politics. There was a technical claim, a public accusation, a denial, a legal argument, and a broader diplomatic contest over who was militarizing space. Each side had an audience. Like, the United States was speaking to allies, adversaries, Congress, commercial operators, and the public. Russia was speaking to its own public, neutral states, arms control audiences, and anyone inclined to distrust American claims. This is why space security cannot be separated from narrative warfare. Orbital data matters, but so does the story built around it. If one state can cast its suspicious behavior as peaceful, and the other state's warning as propaganda, it gains room to maneuver. If the accuser can present credible evidence, supported by commercial or allied tracking, it reduces that room. The rise of commercial space domain awareness has changed this contest. Companies such as Leo Labs and Comstock can track, analyze, and publicize behavior that once would have remained mostly inside classified government channels. The April 2026 reporting on Cosmos 2581 and Cosmos 2583 rested on commercial tracking and analysis, making the event accessible to a broader audience. That broader visibility matters. A government claim supported by commercial data is harder to dismiss as pure state messaging. It gives journalists, allies, commercial firms, and independent analysts something to examine. It also creates a new strategic dependency. If commercial firms become part of public attribution, then their sensors, analytics platforms, data pipelines, and cyber defenses become part of the space security architecture. Russia understands the political value of ambiguity. Its broader security behavior often operates around threshold testing. Airspace probes, cyber operations, information campaigns, naval shadowing, and deniable support structures all use uncertainty to slow response and divide opponents. Space is well suited to this style. It is remote, technical, classified, and legally underdeveloped. In other words, it is a bureaucrat's haunted mansion with excellent telemetry. Russia does not need to defeat the US military in space to create strategic effects. It can aim to complicate planning, raise doubts, threaten high-value assets, and signal that US or allied action on Earth may carry risks in orbit. A satellite approaching a sensitive spacecraft during a crisis could force Washington to decide whether to disclose intelligence, maneuver defensively, issue warnings, or accept risk. That kind of decision trap is useful to Moscow. If the United States responds strongly, Russia may accuse it of escalation. If the United States says little, Russia may learn that threshold pressure works. If the United States reveals classified tracking or capability data, Russia learns something. If the United States moves the target satellite, Russia may learn about fuel margins, defensive plans, or response doctrine. Every choice leaks something, and this is the coercive value of proximity. The threatening object imposes decisions on the target state before any attack occurs. That makes RPO valuable during crisis. It gives Russia a way to signal, pressure, and learn, all while keeping its public position wrapped in claims of peaceful activity. The nesting doll pattern adds another layer. Russian satellites have reportedly released smaller objects during some missions, creating uncertainty about what those objects are and what they are meant to do. A parent satellite that deploys a sub-satellite complicates tracking, attribution, and risk analysis. It forces observers to ask whether the released object is a sensor, an inspector, a calibration target, a weapon, or something else entirely. Small objects create special problems. They may be harder to track than larger satellites. Their purpose may be harder to infer. If they maneuver, even modestly, their risk profile changes. A released object near a sensitive orbital path may force operators to assess collision risk, hostile intent, and defensive options under time pressure. The little thing becomes a large problem, which is a respectable trick if one is trying to ruin another man's afternoon from orbit. This does not make Russia omnipotent. The United States has extensive tracking capabilities, military space organizations, intelligence assets, commercial partnerships, and allied systems. Russia can create pressure, but it is also watched. Its maneuvers can be recorded. Its denials can be tested against orbital data. Its behavior can be placed into a pattern. The problem is that being watched does not automatically prevent coercion. Surveillance improves attribution, but it does not erase risk. A burglar seen on camera is still inside the house. The fact that everyone can identify him later may be cold comfort to the silverware. This is where public attribution becomes important. If Russia uses ambiguous space behavior, the United States and its allies need the ability to present the behavior clearly. They need to say what happened, why it matters, how it fits the pattern, and what responsible conduct would look like. That requires evidence and discipline. Overstating the case damages credibility. Understating the case invites more probing. Russia's recent close proximity maneuver is important because it shows technical confidence within an already sensitive pattern. Even if the maneuver was a test between Russian-owned satellites, it demonstrated skill relevant to future operations near foreign assets. Capability changes planning. Intent may be disputed, but capacity must be accounted for. That is the sober way to read this. Russia has shown that it can conduct sophisticated proximity operations. It has a history of military and intelligence, RPO activity. It has been accused by the United States of threatening behavior near sensitive satellites. It denies hostile intent. The strategic contest lives inside that combination. The next crisis may not begin with a strike. It may begin with a Russian spacecraft changing orbit in a way that looks routine to the casual observer and deeply abnormal to the people responsible for keeping military satellites alive. The quietness will be part of the danger. Ambiguity is often treated as a problem to be solved. In space security, it is also a tool to be used. A state that can operate ambiguously can probe, signal, pressure, and deny. It can make another state spend resources while avoiding the kind of open act that triggers a clear response. RPO is one of the best examples of this problem. A close approach can be described in several ways. It may be an inspection, it may be a calibration event, it may be formation flying, it may be intelligence collection, it may be a rehearsal for attack, it may be an intimidation maneuver, it may be a way to test another state's response time. The physical act is observable. The intention behind it remains contested. This is not a small distinction. Deterrence depends on thresholds. If one state can say, if you do this, we will respond that way, then the other state has a clearer choice. Ambiguous proximity behavior muddies the threshold. What exactly is the violation? Is it the distance, the lack of notice, the rate of closure, the target selection, the release of a smaller object, the pattern over time, the combination of RPO with cyber or electronic activity? When the threshold is unclear, response becomes harder. A mild response may look weak. A strong response may look escalatory. Doing nothing may encourage repetition. Moving the satellite may waste fuel and reveal defensive procedures. Public accusation may require disclosing sensitive evidence. Private warning may fail to impose cost. Every option arrives with teeth. This is why ambiguity becomes useful. It traps the defender between overreaction and underreaction. It creates a narrow hallway where every door has a bill attached. The closest analogy may be cyber operations. A hostile actor inside a network may be stealing data, mapping systems, staging malware, preparing disruption, or testing access. The victim may detect activity, but struggle to classify it. Espionage is common among states. Preparation for sabotage is more serious. A destructive attack crosses another line. The technical difference may be hard to prove in real time. A suspicious satellite near a high-value spacecraft creates a similar challenge. Is it spying? Is it rehearsing? Is it signaling? Is it waiting? A defender may know enough to worry, but not enough to build a consensus for retaliation. That space between knowledge and proof is where coercion breeds. Ambiguity also benefits from classification. Many high-value satellites have sensitive missions. Their operators may not want to reveal capabilities, vulnerabilities, or defensive responses. If a Russian satellite approaches a U.S. intelligence asset, the United States may hesitate to disclose exactly what it knows, how it knows it, or how the target satellite responded. This protects sources and methods, but it also limits public explanation. Commercial data can help fill part of that gap. Public tracking can show approaches, releases, orbital relationships, and maneuver patterns. It cannot reveal everything. It may not show payload activity, command intent, sensor status, or classified intelligence. Still, it gives policymakers something to point to when the accused party performs innocence with the tenderness of a crocodile arranging flowers. The legal structure adds another layer. The Outer Space Treaty and related legal frameworks establish broad principles, but they do not give a simple operational rule for every close approach. International law speaks of peaceful use, due regard, harmful interference, responsibility, liability, and registration. These concepts matter, but RPO produces hard practical questions. How close may one state satellite approach another state satellite without prior notice? Does the answer change for military satellites? Does it change during crisis? Does it change if the approaching satellite has released another object? What if there is no contact, no damage, and no obvious interference? What if the target state spends fuel to avoid a risk that the approaching state denies creating? These questions do not vanish because diplomats prefer softer language. They sit underneath every serious discussion of responsible behavior in orbit. The law provides principles. Operators need thresholds. This is where norms can help, but only if they become concrete. A norm that says states should behave responsibly is better than nothing, but it is thin gruel for a satellite operator watching an unknown object close in. Useful norms must say more. They must address notification, safe separation, data sharing, communication channels, planned RPO activity, and unacceptable behavior near another state's assets. Norms also require verification. A rule that cannot be observed, measured, or attributed will struggle under pressure. Space domain awareness is therefore not merely technical infrastructure. It is the foundation for diplomacy. If states cannot see and characterize behavior, they cannot enforce standards around behavior. That is why SDA matters so much. Traditional space situational awareness was often framed as orbital traffic knowledge, where objects are, whether they might collide, and how to maintain the catalog. Space domain awareness is broader. It asks who controls the object, what it is doing, whether its behavior is normal, how it fits a known pattern, and what risk it creates. Traffic management asks whether two cars are about to crash. Domain awareness asks why one car has been following the other for 40 miles. RPO demands domain awareness. A single close approach may be explainable. A pattern of close approaches, releases, shadowing, and sensitive target selection is harder to wave away. Behavior over time builds meaning. This is how ambiguity can be reduced, though rarely eliminated. Analysts can compare current behavior with past missions. They can examine launch history, orbital parameters, maneuver timing, proximity to sensitive assets, public statements, and technical capability. No single data point may settle intent. A pattern can narrow the field. The commercial sector complicates this in a useful way. In earlier decades, a suspicious satellite maneuver might have remained mostly inside classified channels. Today, commercial trackers, independent analysts, academics, and journalists can contribute to the public record. That does not make everyone right. It does mean governments no longer hold the whole observing field. The sky has more witnesses now. There is a strategic benefit to this. Public exposure can impose reputational cost. It can warn commercial operators. It can help allies coordinate. It can make denial harder. A state may still deny hostile intent, but it cannot as easily deny that the maneuver happened. There is also risk. Public analysis can be incomplete. Commercial firms may disagree. Governments may overuse commercial findings to support claims that need deeper evidence. Adversaries may try to confuse the data environment. They may launch decoys, spread false interpretations, cyber attack tracking firms, or accuse commercial analysts of serving military agendas. The tracking fight becomes an information fight. The information fight becomes part of deterrence. For commercial operators, ambiguity has a different flavor. A government can absorb geopolitical uncertainty as part of statecraft. A company has customers, contracts, insurers, regulators, lenders, and board members. If a suspicious object approaches a commercial communications satellite, the company must decide whether to maneuver, notify customers, request government help, alter service expectations, or keep quiet. None of these choices is clean. Commercial satellites increasingly support national security functions. They provide imagery, communications, data, weather information, and other services that can affect military operations. The war in Ukraine made this plain. Commercial space systems are no longer background infrastructure. They can become strategic assets during conflict. That makes them targets for pressure. An adversary may prefer to avoid openly attacking a commercial satellite because the political and economic consequences could be severe. Yet it may still harass, shadow, intimidate, jam, cyber attack, or otherwise pressure commercial systems. RPO gives one more way to create risk without announcing war. This is where the business world needs to mature. Space insurance, service contracts, customer notifications, government coordination, and cyber response plans must account for hostile proximity behavior. A suspicious close approach is not merely an engineering problem. It is a revenue, liability, mission assurance, and national security problem. The policy world must mature as well. Too many public discussions of space security still divide activity into peaceful use or warfare. That is too simple. Much of the serious action lives in the middle, where coercion happens without detonation. The vocabulary must catch up with the behavior. A satellite that stalks another satellite may not violate a bright line rule. It may still be dangerous. A satellite that releases a small object near a sensitive orbit may not create immediate damage. It may still signal capability and intent. A close approach to a national security satellite during a terrestrial crisis may not be an attack. It may still shape decision-making on Earth. This is the future space security problem in plain language. States will use orbital behavior to create political effects. They will do so because the behavior is difficult to classify, difficult to deter, and difficult to punish without escalation. The maneuver itself may be small, the consequence may be large. That is why the killer satellite may never fire. Firing may defeat the purpose. Destruction clarifies, ambiguity coerces. The answer to ambiguous RPO is neither panic nor passivity. Panic turns every maneuver into a crisis. Passivity teaches adversaries that proximity pressure is cheap. The United States and its allies need a layered approach that makes orbital coercion visible, survivable, and costly. The first layer is better space domain awareness. A state cannot deter what it cannot see. It cannot attribute what it cannot characterize. It cannot persuade allies with vague warnings and classified hand gestures. It needs tracking, analysis, fusion, and public evidence where possible. Military sensors, intelligence systems, commercial radar and optical networks, allied assets, and academic observers all contribute to a richer picture. The goal is not perfect certainty. Perfect certainty is rare in strategy and usually arrives late, wearing funeral clothes. The goal is enough confidence to make decisions, warn partners, expose behavior, and impose costs. That requires persistent tracking and analytic discipline. Commercial data will be increasingly important here. The April 2026 Cosmos reporting showed how commercial tracking can make a complex orbital event visible to the public. That matters because public attribution is part of modern deterrence. If a state knows its suspicious behavior can be observed and explained, denial becomes less comfortable. The second layer is resilience. If one satellite represents a single point of failure, it becomes a hostage. If the mission can continue through other assets, alternate pathways, allied systems, commercial services, or rapid replacement, then the coercive value of threatening that satellite falls. Resilience reduces reward. This is one reason proliferated constellations are attractive. A large number of smaller satellites can make targeting harder and mission disruption less decisive. The adversary must scale its pressure. It cannot assume that one exquisite object carries the whole mission. Of course, proliferated architectures have their own weaknesses. They depend on ground systems, cloud infrastructure, supply chains, launch cadence, software, and cyber protection. There is no magic architecture, only trade-offs with better manners. Resilience also applies beyond satellites. Ground stations, user terminals, command networks, data links, software pipelines, and mission operations centers all matter. A satellite in orbit may be threatened physically, but its weakness may sit in a server room on Earth where someone reused a password and called it fate. The third layer is defensive maneuver planning. Operators need to know how they will respond to a suspicious approach before one occurs. They need thresholds, decision authorities, fuel planning, communication channels, and rehearsal. A crisis is the wrong time to discover that engineering, legal, public affairs, operations, security, and executive leadership define threat 6 different ways. Defensive maneuver is not free. It burns fuel, disrupts operations, and may reveal capability. Sometimes it is necessary, sometimes it rewards harassment. The art is knowing which case you are in. That judgment improves through exercises, simulations, war games, and repeated coordination between government and commercial operators. The fourth layer is cyber hardening. RPO may look physical, but spacecraft operations are cyber-physical. Commands move through networks. Maneuver planning relies on software. Tracking data flows through digital systems. Operators depend on authentication, encryption, access control, monitoring, and system integrity. An adversary may combine physical proximity with cyber operations against the satellite, the ground station, the operator network, or the data provider. This pairing is especially dangerous. A suspicious satellite approach can distract the defender, while a cyber campaign targets command systems or situational awareness feeds. A compromised data stream could misrepresent relative motion. A delayed command could prevent a timely maneuver. A stolen credential could become more damaging than a hostile thruster burn. Space security without cyber discipline is a castle with a golden gate and a basement window labeled admin. The fifth layer is response options below kinetic retaliation. If the only choices are silence or war, adversaries will live in the space between them. Policymakers need a ladder: public attribution, diplomatic protest, sanctions, coordinated allied statements, defensive posture changes, commercial warnings, cyber responses, and reversible counterspace options may all have roles depending on the behavior. The key is proportionality with consequence. A single unusual maneuver may warrant monitoring and quiet warning. Repeated unannounced approaches near sensitive assets may warrant public exposure and diplomatic cost. A released object near a target may require a stronger response. The response should reflect the pattern, not merely the headline. Allied coordination is the sixth layer. Space systems support alliances, NATO operations, Indo-Pacific deterrence, missile warning, communications, and intelligence sharing all depend on orbital assets. A threat to one ally's satellite may affect another ally's operations. A commercial asset owned in one country may support military customers in several others. The architecture is tangled because modern civilization enjoys making every important system into a bowl of cables. Allies need shared language for RPO. They need data sharing pathways, legal interpretations, public messaging templates, and response frameworks. That preparation is dull, but dull preparation is one of the ways serious societies avoid spectacular failure. Meetings are cheaper than improvising during a crisis. The seventh layer is norm building backed by conduct. The United States and its allies should support clearer expectations for responsible proximity operations. These expectations should address prior notification, safe distances, communication practices, behavior near sensitive assets, and the release of secondary objects. The standard should be concrete enough to matter and flexible enough to account for legitimate servicing, inspection, and debris removal missions. Credibility requires self-discipline. If the United States wants others to accept norms against dangerous RPO behavior, it must be prepared to explain its own principles and act consistently where possible. Classified missions will remain classified. That is reality. But broad standards can still be articulated, and responsible conduct can still be demonstrated. Deterrence in space is becoming less about preventing one spectacular attack and more about managing constant pressure. The old fear of a massive anti-satellite strike remains valid, especially in a major war. Yet the everyday contest may look more like persistent friction, suspicious approaches, electronic interference, cyber probing, gray zone signaling, legal disputes, and public arguments over intent. A layered deterrent strategy aims to make that friction less profitable. It tells adversaries that suspicious behavior will be seen, exposed, absorbed, and answered. It tells commercial operators they are part of the security architecture. It tells allies they will not be left to interpret orbital threats alone. It tells policymakers that vague principles must become operational standards. The killer satellite that never fires can be deterred, but speeches will not do it. Deterrence requires sensors, architecture, doctrine, cyber protection, commercial coordination, allied unity, and political will. The most important sentence in space security may become simple: "We see what you are doing." That sentence only works when it is true. For defense leaders, RPO is an escalation management problem. It is not enough to know where objects are. Military organizations must understand what suspicious proximity behavior means, how quickly decisions must be made, who has authority to respond, what evidence can be shared, and which options exist below open conflict. A close approach during a crisis could move faster than policy consensus. If a Russian satellite begins maneuvering near a US or Allied asset during a terrestrial confrontation, the response cannot begin with a meeting where everyone spends 10 minutes finding the mute button. The relevant teams need pre-planned channels, decision criteria, and rehearsed options. Defense leaders also need to treat RPO as part of joint warfare. A threat to a satellite is rarely a space-only problem. If the target supports missile warning, the issue may touch nuclear stability. If it supports communications, the issue may affect command and control. If it supports ISR, the issue may shape targeting and battlefield awareness. Space is not a distant support function. It is woven into how modern militaries fight. The military must also integrate commercial systems more seriously. Commercial imagery, communications, data relay, and space domain awareness firms are no longer optional extras. In a crisis, they may provide essential capability. If their systems matter to defense operations, they need threat information, reporting channels, cyber standards, and coordination plans before hostile behavior begins. For commercial operators, the lesson is blunt. Orbital threat behavior is now a business risk. A satellite company may think in terms of service uptime, customer contracts, regulatory compliance, capital expenditure, and launch insurance. Adversaries think in terms of function. If a commercial system supports military communications, public evidence collection, logistics, emergency response, or financial timing. It may become strategically relevant whether the company likes the label or not. Commercial operators need better preparation for suspicious proximity events. They need access to tracking data, internal escalation processes, government contacts, maneuver plans, and customer communication strategies. They also need to understand how cyber risks and physical risks interact. A suspicious orbital maneuver may occur alongside phishing, credential theft, data manipulation, or attacks on ground infrastructure. Insurance and contract language will need to catch up. What counts as hostile interference? Who pays for a defensive maneuver? How should lost fuel be valued? What if service is interrupted because an operator prudently moved away from a suspicious object? What if a government customer requests a maneuver that affects commercial service obligations? These questions sound like paperwork until they arrive with invoices. For policymakers, the challenge is language, law, and consequence. The policy world needs more precise terms for proximity behavior. Broad phrases such as responsible behavior have value, but they are incomplete. Policymakers must define what responsible RPO looks like in practice. They must address notification, safe separation, repeated shadowing, sub-satellite releases, threatening approaches, and evidence sharing. They must also resist the temptation to treat legal ambiguity as strategic helplessness. The lack of a perfect rule does not mean behavior is irrelevant. States can still condemn dangerous conduct, coordinate with allies, publish evidence, apply diplomatic cost, and build norms around specific patterns. The Cosmos 2576 dispute shows how quickly counterspace allegations become diplomatic contests. The United States characterized the satellite as a potential counterspace weapon. Russia denied the claim and accused Washington of politicizing the issue. That exchange is the world we are in. Technical events turned into legal arguments, turned into strategic messaging. The answer is not theatrical certainty. Policymakers should not overstate what they know. They should present evidence carefully, distinguish capability from intent, and place behavior in context. Credibility is a strategic asset. Spend it cheaply, and it will not be there when the hard case comes. The stakeholder lesson is that defense, commercial, and policy communities cannot operate in separate rooms. Defense needs commercial tracking and resilient services. Commercial operators need government warning and policy clarity. Policymakers need operational facts and technical humility. If those communities remain divided, adversaries will work in the seams. That is the mature reading of the Russian RPO problem. It is not merely about one maneuver. It is about whether the United States and its allies can build a system that sees suspicious behavior, interprets it quickly, protects critical missions, and answers coercion without stumbling into unnecessary escalation. Space is often described as vast. Operationally, it is getting smaller. The more valuable the orbital infrastructure becomes, the more crowded the strategic neighborhood feels. A satellite 3 meters away can suddenly make space feel very intimate. The forecast is clear. Space conflict will be quieter than the public expects and more frequent than policymakers prefer. The dramatic forms of attack remain possible: direct descent anti-satellite weapons, cyber attacks, electronic warfare, directed energy systems, and destructive co-orbital weapons all matter. Yet much of the near-term contest will happen below the threshold of visible war. A spacecraft will approach another spacecraft. A commercial tracker will publish an analysis. A government will issue a guarded statement. The accused state will deny hostile intent. Allies will ask for evidence. Operators will examine fuel margins. Lawyers will ask whether the behavior qualifies as harmful interference. Public affairs teams will produce careful sentences that say less than everyone in the room knows. That is how gray zone space competition will look. Less thunder, more arithmetic. Russia's April 2026 close proximity maneuver between Cosmos 2581 and Cosmos 2583 may have been a technical test, a military rehearsal, a signal, or some combination of those things. The precise purpose may remain disputed. The demonstrated capability is harder to dismiss. Russia showed sophisticated close proximity behavior involving multiple objects in low Earth orbit, and it did so against a background of previous Russian RPO activity and counterspace concern. The strategic lesson reaches beyond Russia. In orbit, proximity is power. A satellite that can get close can inspect, signal, threaten, harass, or prepare. It may never fire. It may never collide. It may never create debris. It may still influence decisions on Earth. That is the new grammar of orbital coercion. The movement may be measured in meters. The consequence may be measured in alliance confidence, military readiness, commercial risk, and crisis stability. For the week ahead, watch Russian RPO behavior, commercial tracking reports, and official language from the United States and its allies. The technical details matter, but so does the vocabulary. When governments begin speaking more precisely about proximity, safe separation, and threatening behavior, it usually means operators have already seen enough to worry. The killer satellite that never fires is dangerous because it lives in the seam between peace and war. It uses movement instead of explosions. It uses uncertainty instead of declaration. It turns silence into pressure. The next contest in space may begin with no flash at all. It may begin with an approach. This has been Orbital Estimate. End transmission.